Multilateralism has been failed by abuse of trust, negligence, and impunity. A year ago, I stood in this assembly hall to call upon the global community to transform the UN system in order to achieve a consensus-driven, rules-based multilateral system which works for the people of the world in their diversity. It is time for multilateralism to reflect the voice of the farmers, represent the hopes of villagers, champion the aspirations of pastoralists, defend the rights of fisherfolk, express the dreams of traders, respect the wishes of workers, and indeed protect the welfare of all peoples of the world. In the face of the most urgent crisis of our time, it is now clear that the international community has fallen seriously behind in meeting its targets in both climate action and the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, as well as their underlying enabler, peace and security. We as Africa have come to the world not to ask for arms, charity, or handouts, but to work with the rest of the global community to give every human being in this world a decent chance of security and prosperity by taking necessary actions, mobilizing adequate resources for investment, confronting security challenges, and resolving conflict as we all make our contribution to global prosperity. Kenya is proud of the contribution it continues to make in its tireless endeavor to support peacemaking, conflict prevention, peacekeeping, peace building, and other interventions undertaken across different regions. All across Africa, there is progress in efforts to resolve conflict and restore peace and stability, while at the same time, we are witnessing setbacks to democratic consolidation in the form of unconstitutional changes to governments. Kenya remains committed in its contribution to unity, peace, security, stability, and prosperity. Often, we have made encouraging progress. Mistrust between the global north versus the global south, developed versus developing, polluters versus victims, and net emitters versus net victims, which complicate and frustrates multilateralism, is the inevitable result of
promises not kept, commitments not actualized, resolutions not honored,
and principles not observed. Multilateralism has been failed by abuse of trust, negligence, and impunity. A year ago, I stood in this assembly hall to call upon the global community to transform the UN system in order to achieve a consensus-driven, rules-based multilateral system which works for the people of the world in their diversity. It is time for multilateralism to reflect the voice of the farmers, represent the hopes of villagers, champion the aspirations of pastoralists, defend the rights of fisherfolk, express the dreams of traders, respect the wishes of workers, and indeed protect the welfare of all peoples of the world. In the face of the most urgent crisis of our time, it is now clear that the international community has fallen seriously behind in meeting its targets in both climate action and the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, as well as their underlying enabler, peace and security. We as Africa have come to the world not to ask for arms, charity, or handouts, but to work with the rest of the global community to give every human being in this world a decent chance of security and prosperity by taking necessary actions, mobilizing adequate resources for investment, confronting security challenges, and resolving conflict and there are many, as a great friend and true sibling of Haiti. This should be part of a comprehensive strategy that includes delivering humanitarian aid, supporting livelihoods, instituting reforms, and fostering a political process guided and owned by Haitians, all in the aim of enabling free and fair elections within a reasonable time frame. We are encouraged by many countries which have already stepped forward to take part in this solidarity. We must recognize that stability, peace, and security form the foundation on which the pursuit and realization of sustainable development and climate action stands. This realization must enable us to formulate strategies which treat these initiatives as interconnected, mutually reinforcing, and complementary dimensions of a single agenda. The tragic spectacle of young people from Africa boarding rickety contraptions to gamble their lives away on dangerous voyages in pursuit of opportunities abroad, either as conflict, climate, or economic refugees, is a statement of the failure of the global economic system. At the recently concluded Africa Climate Summit in Nairobi, we undertook to begin the journey to course correct and execute a paradigm shift in our pursuit for development and climate action. First, we recognize that both climate action and sustainable development goals must be pursued simultaneously with greater resolve, urgency, and ambition. No meaningful development can take place in countries that are also struggling with climate shocks, and yet, at the same time, the frequency of climate emergencies impedes any meaningful development. As a defining outcome of the Africa Climate Summit, we committed Africa to consider the dual problems through an opportunity lens and deliver effective solutions by pursuing a fresh trajectory. Development is a basic necessity for every society. It must happen one way or another. There should be no doubt about that. Annually, 30 million young people in our continent need jobs, and many more need food. Half of our continent is in the dark without access to electricity in 2023, while hundreds of millions can only cook using biomass because they have no electricity. This is why the commitment of African nations in the Nairobi Declaration is both radical and transformative. Development, in our opinion, is a fundamental imperative, and green growth is the only sustainable way to achieve it. From our standpoint, there is no need to be trapped in a false choice. Sustainable development is robust climate action, and climate action is development. Africa's potential is defined by abundant and diverse resources, ranging from a youthful, highly skilled, and motivated young population, immense renewable energy potential, and mineral resources, including critical minerals, and extensive natural capital endowment, including 60% of the world's unutilized arable land. Capital and technology can find no better returns anywhere than the tremendous investment opportunity in Africa's potential. Such investment would drive green growth, creating jobs and wealth, while decarbonizing global production and consumption. The investments would also connect over 600 people to clean electricity, provide clean cooking to about 1 billion people, finance green manufacturing, including e-mobility, transform African agriculture and food systems, including the manufacture of green fertilizer, process vast tonnage of steel, aluminum, and lithium required by new green industries, and enable our young people find the livelihoods they desire at home and reverse the tide of migration in the opposite direction. To unlock financing at scale and create incentives for investment at scale in green opportunities, the Nairobi Declaration makes the reform of the international financial system a priority. No meaningful climate action or development can take place in conditions of financial distress. According to IMF data, as of last month, 10 low-income countries were already in debt distress, and 52 are at high or moderate risk of falling into debt distress. The 3.3 billion people in these countries are trapped in a vicious circle of emergency responses, reconstruction, and recovery from more frequent climate shocks, which diverts resources away from both development and climate action, and sucking vulnerable countries into a downward spiral of debt and environmental stress. The global community must therefore develop a debt restructuring initiative that does not wait for nations to plunge over the cliff into debt distress before providing relief. Rather, the new sovereign debt architecture should extend the tenure of sovereign debt and provide a 10-year grace period for countries that are in debt distress. The second financing intervention relates to concessional financing. It is time to work with the international financial institutions to provide more concessional loans, approximately to the tune, in our estimation, of about $500 billion, and to provide increased liquidity support through special drawing rights with a minimum target of what was obtained during the COVID pandemic of $650 billion. Access should be based on specific needs, not entitlement, and this necessitates changes to the allocation mechanism different from what we saw during SDRs for COVID. The third critical reform is that of the financial market reorganization. The entire system of risk assessment and the opaque methodologies employed by credit rating agencies and risk analysis needs to be overhauled at the minimum. We must all recall the miscalculation of subprime mortgage risks by these agencies 2 decades ago, which precipitated a financial crisis whose effects reverberate to date, and ask the following question: on what basis should we believe that their methodologies are better at assessing risk in faraway frontier markets like ours that are far much more complicated to measure objectively than in assessing the value of financial assets in the markets where they actually operate, and which they got so disastrously wrong? If they got it wrong then, I bet you they have it wrong now. In any case, any objective rating must also take into account principles of responsible sovereign lending and accounting, specifically emphasizing the need for international accounting systems that supports the proper valuation of mineral wealth, natural capital, and ecosystem services in the computation of national GDPs. Until that is done, very wealthy countries will be categorized as poor. The fourth limb of the interventions arising out of the Nairobi Declaration is the establishment of a global public climate financing mechanism funded through a global carbon tax on trade in fossil fuels, as well as an emissions levy on aviation and maritime transport, including the option of a global financial transactions tax in order to make available dedicated, affordable, and accessible capital for green investments at scale. The roadmap to this new and urgently needed institutional infrastructure involves sustained engagement at various multilateral processes, and the instruments to actualize it by 2025 shall be a new global climate finance charter to be negotiated through the United Nations General Assembly, COP28, and associated processes. We understand the facts about our collective situation as a global community and as a member of the United Nations family. We know the magnitude of our shared challenges and common threats. We appreciate that multilateralism is on trial, and our task is to defend it. We also recognize that multilateralism is broken, and it is our responsibility to fix it. From this moment to 2030, and from our problems to their solutions, we are connected by a coherent agenda of robust collective action. We must therefore muster the courage and will to stand together in solidarity and act, to right past wrongs, solve present problems, and secure our collective future, to protect and empower all people and support our friends in need, to restore broken trust, raise hopes high, and keep faith strong, and finally, to pursue, achieve, and sustain positive change in order to make billions of cherished dreams come true. We must start right away, for we have no time to lose. And I thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Kenya and Commander-in-Chief of the Defense Forces for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency